My mother-in-law poisoned my food to prove my deadly allergy was fake. I didn't know that yet as I sat at the restaurant table, twirling pasta on my fork, exhausted from years of defending my own body. I just knew my throat felt tight. Too tight. My chest burned, and the room started to blur at the edges. I've had a shellfish allergy my entire life. Not the kind people joke about. Not the kind you get over. The kind where your airway closes, and you have minutes before your body gives up. I had told my husband, Daniel, that on our second date. He believed me instantly. His mother, Margaret, never did. To her, my allergy wasn't medical. It was manipulation. Attention-seeking. A lie she was determined to expose. As my husband reached for the EpiPen with shaking hands, I saw Margaret standing across the room, watching me struggle to breathe. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't an accident. She wanted to prove I was lying, even if it killed me. The first time I told Margaret about my allergy, she laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an awkward one. A sharp, amused sound, like I'd just told a bad joke. "Oh, honey," she said, waving her hand dismissively across the dinner table. "People fake allergies all the time nowadays." Daniel's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "Mom," he said carefully, "Emily could literally die." Margaret tilted her head, studying me the way someone looks at a stain they're not sure is real. "Everyone's allergic to something now. Gluten, dairy, shellfish. It's always something." I forced a smile, even though my stomach tightened. "I carry an EpiPen," I said. "I've been hospitalized before." She raised an eyebrow. "Doctors diagnose anything if you complain enough." That was the moment I should have understood who she really was. At first, I tried to be patient. I showed her my medical alert bracelet. I explained cross-contamination. I even offered to have my allergist speak to her. Margaret waved it all away like it was background noise. Family dinners became a minefield. She cooked elaborate meals heavy with seafood, then acted offended when I couldn't eat. "Oh, right," she'd sigh dramatically. "Your allergy. I forgot." When Daniel brought safe food for me, she snapped. "It's rude to bring outside food into my house." When I quietly declined her cooking, she told relatives I was controlling and difficult. "She uses food to manipulate my son," I overheard her say once. "She wants all the attention." Daniel argued with her constantly. "She's not lying, Mom. This isn't about you." Margaret always cried after those fights. "I'm just worried about you," she'd sob. "She's putting ideas in your head." Then came the comments that made my skin crawl. She'd lean close and whisper, "You know, if you really had an allergy, you'd react every time." Or she'd say after dinner, smiling sweetly, "There might have been shrimp paste in that sauce. But you seem fine." I wasn't fine. My heart would race. My throat would itch. I'd panic and take antihistamines, watching my body for hours. Margaret would laugh and say, "See? It's psychological." Daniel finally slammed his hand on the table one night. "Stop messing with her food." Margaret looked genuinely offended. "I'm helping her," she said. "Exposure therapy works." That was when I realized something terrifying. Margaret didn't believe my allergy was fake by accident. She believed it with conviction, and she was determined to prove it, even if proving it meant hurting me. After that night, something shifted. Margaret stopped arguing with me outright. Instead, she became sweet. Too sweet. She started smiling more, touching my arm when she spoke, calling me dear. "That's good," she said one afternoon while pouring me a drink. "If you relax, your body won't overreact so much." I didn't like the way she said overreact. Family dinners didn't stop. They just changed shape. Margaret would announce proudly, "I made this especially for Emily. No shellfish at all." Everyone would look at me, waiting. If I hesitated, she'd sigh. "See? This is what I mean. She doesn't even try." Daniel would squeeze my knee under the table. "You don't have to eat it," he whispered. But every time I refused, Margaret added another brick to the story she was telling about me. She enjoys being difficult. She wants control. She's turning my son against his own family. Once, after dinner, she cornered me alone in the kitchen. "You know," she said quietly, rinsing plates, "Daniel used to eat everything I made. He never questioned me." "I'm not questioning you," I said. "I'm protecting myself." She laughed softly. "From what?" "A little food." Then she leaned closer. "I think you like the attention." I stopped sleeping well after that. Every meal felt like a test I didn't know I was taking. If my throat felt tight, I wondered if I was imagining it. If my lips tingled, I told myself not to panic. Margaret noticed everything. She watched me eat. "You okay?" she'd ask, eyes sharp. "You look nervous." One night, halfway through dinner, she casually said, "Oh, I almost forgot. I used oyster sauce in the vegetables." My fork clattered onto the plate. Margaret blinked innocently. "But it's such a tiny amount. You're probably fine." I locked myself in the bathroom, shaking, swallowing antihistamines and staring at my reflection while my heart pounded. When I came out, Margaret was laughing with the rest of the family. She gets anxious, she explained. It's all in her head. Daniel exploded in the car afterward. You can't keep doing this, he said. You're scaring her. Margaret cried, of course. I'm just trying to help, she sobbed. She's trapped in fear. Someone has to push her past it. That was when Daniel suggested we stop eating at her house. Margaret took it as a personal attack. She started bringing food to our apartment instead. Covered dishes. Carefully labeled containers. I made this just for you, she'd say, smiling tightly. I stopped eating anything she touched. She told the family I was punishing her. She won't even taste my food, she said. After everything I've done. By then, I was constantly on edge. My body felt like a battlefield. I questioned every sensation, every swallow, every breath. And Margaret watched it all with calm, satisfied eyes. I didn't know it yet, but she wasn't guessing anymore. She was collecting evidence. The first time I realized Margaret was doing it on purpose, I didn't want to believe it. I needed it to be a misunderstanding. A careless mistake. Anything but what my instincts were screaming at me. It started small. One night after dinner, she smiled casually and said, "Oh, I forgot to mention, there might have been a little fish sauce in that marinade." My stomach dropped. I waited, listened to my breathing, counted my heartbeats like my allergist had taught me. Within minutes, my lips started tingling. My throat felt itchy, like I'd swallowed fiberglass. Margaret watched me from across the table. "See," she said lightly, "you're still alive." I took antihistamines and spent the night shaking, terrified I'd wake up unable to breathe. The next morning, Margaret texted Daniel. "Told you she's fine." Anxiety does that. After that, it happened again. And again. Tiny amounts. Invisible amounts. Enough to make my body react, but not enough to send me to the hospital. Margaret became almost cheerful about it. She'd say things like, "Interesting how your symptoms aren't consistent." Or, "If this were real, wouldn't you be in the ER by now?" Daniel caught her once sprinkling something onto my plate. "What was that?" he demanded. Margaret didn't even flinch. "Seasoning," she said. "You're overreacting." On the drive home, Daniel gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. "She can't keep doing this," he said. "I won't let her." I wanted to believe him, but the damage was already done. I stopped trusting my own body. If I felt dizzy, I wondered if it was panic. If my throat tightened, I told myself not to be dramatic. Margaret had planted that doubt so deep I couldn't tell fear from danger anymore. One afternoon, she called me directly. "I've been reading," she said, sounding pleased. "Exposure therapy works for phobias." "This isn't a phobia," I said. "It's an allergy." She laughed softly. "You say that because you're scared." After that call, I stopped eating anything she prepared. Completely. No exceptions. Margaret didn't stop. She started insisting she'd made food, especially for me. She'd bring containers to our apartment and set them on the counter like gifts. "If you won't eat at my house," she said, "at least try this." When I refused, she told the family I was being cruel. "She won't even give me a chance," she said. "How can she heal if she won't try?" The worst part was the look in her eyes when she said it. Not anger, not confusion, satisfaction. She was no longer guessing whether my allergy was real. She was testing a theory, adjusting variables, watching outcomes. And I was the experiment. Daniel finally said we were done seeing her altogether. Margaret smiled calmly and nodded. "I understand," she said. "I just want what's best for everyone." I should have been relieved. Instead, a chill settled in my chest. Because by then, I knew something Daniel didn't. Margaret wasn't trying to protect her family. She was trying to prove she was right. And she wasn't finished yet. Daniel's birthday dinner was supposed to be safe. That was the lie I told myself as we walked into the restaurant Margaret had chosen. White tablecloths. Soft lighting. The kind of place where everyone pretended nothing bad ever happened. Margaret hugged Daniel tightly, kissed his cheek, and smiled at me like nothing had changed. "I already spoke to the waiter," she said brightly. "They know about your allergy." I froze. "You did?" She nodded. I wouldn't forget something so important. Daniel looked relieved. I wanted to believe her. I was tired of fighting, tired of defending my own existence at every meal. When the waiter came, Margaret ordered for all of us. "I'll have the steak," she said. "And for Emily, the pasta." "No shellfish." "Absolutely none." The waiter nodded. "No shellfish," he confirmed. "No cross-contamination." Margaret smiled at me across the table. "See," she said softly. "You're safe." When the food arrived, my hands were shaking. I stared at the plate, searching for something, anything, that looked wrong. It smelled normal. It looked normal. Daniel leaned close. You don't have to eat it, he whispered. But I was hungry. And exhausted. And so tired of being the problem. I took one bite. At first, nothing happened. Relief washed over me so fast it almost made me dizzy. I took another bite. Then another. And then my throat tightened. Not a little. Not slowly. It slammed shut like a door. I dropped my fork. My chest burned as I sucked in air that wouldn't go down. My vision blurred. Edges going dark. Daniel, I gasped. I can't. He was out of his chair instantly. Oh my God, he said. Emily. My lips were swelling. My heart was racing so hard I thought it might burst. The room tilted. EpiPen. I croaked. Daniel's hands were shaking as he dug through his bag. Someone screamed. A chair scraped across the floor. I felt the sting in my thigh, and then nothing but fire in my chest. Call 911. Daniel shouted. I heard voices, too many, overlapping, panicked. The taste of metal filled my mouth. My ears rang. Through the haze, I saw Margaret standing at the edge of the room. Watching. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't rushing toward me. She was staring at me with a strange, focused expression, like she was waiting to see what would happen next. That's when terror hit me harder than the allergy. This wasn't an accident. The sirens came fast. Someone laid me flat. Oxygen mask. Bright lights. Hands everywhere. As they wheeled me out, I saw Margaret press a hand to her chest. Oh, this is awful, she said, voice trembling. I don't understand how this happened. The emergency room was chaos. Beeping monitors. Harsh fluorescent lights. My throat felt raw and swollen, like I'd swallowed glass. A doctor leaned over me. You ingested shellfish, she said bluntly. A concentrated amount.
You set the hair.
That's not possible, I whispered. The restaurant. Daniel cut in, his voice breaking. They promised it was safe. Margaret arrived minutes later, breathless, playing the part perfectly. I'm so worried, she said. Could the kitchen have made a mistake? The nurse's eyes narrowed. Shellfish extract doesn't just appear in pasta, she said slowly. This wasn't cross-contamination. The restaurant manager showed up pale and shaking, holding a tablet. We reviewed the security footage, he said, because we're terrified of liability. He turned the screen toward the doctor. The video showed our table, Daniel and me standing up, walking toward the bathroom. Margaret sitting alone. Then, clear as day, Margaret reached into her purse. She pulled out a small bottle, unscrewed the cap, poured liquid onto my pasta, stirred it with my fork. My stomach dropped. The room went silent. That's not possible, Margaret whispered. I didn't. A police officer stepped forward. Ma'am, what was in that bottle? Margaret's face drained of color. It was just fish sauce, she said quickly. For flavor. The officer tilted her head. Why bring fish sauce to a restaurant? She asked to see Margaret's purse. Inside were 3 small bottles. Medical labels. Precise measurements. The officer's expression hardened. This isn't seasoning, she said. This is pharmaceutical-grade shellfish extract. I felt something inside me crack. 2 years. 2 years of doubt. Fear. Pain. Margaret hadn't been guessing. She'd been trying to prove a point, even if proving it meant killing me. As the officer snapped handcuffs around Margaret's wrists, she finally looked at me. Not with guilt. Not with fear. But with disbelief. As if she were the one being betrayed. They didn't take Margaret away immediately. At first, she kept insisting it was a misunderstanding. That she'd only wanted to enhance the flavor. That she didn't know it would hurt me. She cried loudly, theatrically, drawing eyes from nurses and patients down the hallway. I would never harm her, she sobbed. I love her. The police officer didn't look impressed. Ma'am, Officer Brooks said evenly. We're going to need to search your belongings. Margaret stiffened. You don't have the right. Yes, the officer cut in. We do. She reached into Margaret's purse again, slower this time. More deliberate. Out came the bottles I'd already seen. Then more. Small vials. Each one labeled in neat handwriting. Dates. Dosages. My stomach twisted. Officer Brooks set them on the counter one by one. These aren't kitchen ingredients, she said. These are measured. Margaret's voice rose an octave. I read about exposure therapy online, she insisted. You introduce small amounts. You build tolerance. The officer paused and looked directly at her. This isn't a phobia. Then she reached deeper into the purse and pulled out a thin spiral notebook with a blue cover. Something about the way Margaret lunged for it told me everything. That's private, she cried. Officer Brooks flipped it open. Her expression changed almost immediately. She turned a page. Then another. Her jaw tightened. What? Daniel asked hoarsely. What is it? The officer held the notebook up, so we could see. Every page was filled. Dates. Meals. Notes. Small amount in sauce. Subject showed mild throat irritation. Increased dose in marinade. Took antihistamine. No hospital visit. Reaction inconsistent. Psychological component likely. My vision blurred. She'd been writing about me like I wasn't a person. Like I was a lab result. There were entries going back 2 years. 20. Maybe more. Each one documenting how she'd poisoned me and then evaluated the outcome. Officer Brooks closed the notebook slowly.
This shows planning, she said.
Intent. Margaret shook her head, frantically. You don't understand. I was helping her. She's trapped in her own fear. The officer stepped closer. You knowingly exposed someone to a substance that could kill them. Margaret's face crumpled. I never meant for it to go this far. Daniel let out a sound I'd never heard from him before. Somewhere between a sob and a growl. You wrote it down, he said. You tracked it. She looked at him desperately. I was trying to save you both. That was when Officer Brooks said the words that finally made everything real. This constitutes attempted murder. Margaret froze. The hallway went silent. The officer read her rights as she clicked the handcuffs closed. Margaret started shaking, repeating the same sentence over and over. I was misunderstood. I was misunderstood. They walked her past my hospital room. She turned her head once, eyes locked on mine. Not apologetic. Not ashamed. Just stunned that she'd lost control of the story. Daniel stood beside my bed, his hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. His whole body was shaking. I should have stopped her sooner, he whispered. I should have protected you. I wanted to comfort him, to say something reassuring. But all I could think was this. For 2 years, I had been afraid of my own body. And the person who put that fear there had been smiling at me across the dinner table the entire time. The doctor came in just after midnight. She sat on the edge of my hospital bed with my chart in her hands and a look that made my stomach tighten. You were lucky, she said gently. Very lucky. I swallowed, my throat still raw. How close? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Minutes. She explained that the amount of shellfish extract in my system was highly concentrated. Enough to overwhelm my body fast. If Daniel hadn't used the EpiPen immediately, I wouldn't have made it to the hospital. Then she said something that made my chest ache in a different way. Repeated exposure like this can make allergies worse, she said. Not better. I stared at the ceiling as she talked. About increased sensitivity. About carrying 2 EpiPens instead of 1. About being extra careful from now on. Margaret hadn't just almost killed me. She'd damaged me permanently. After the doctor left, the room went quiet. Machines hummed softly. Daniel pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, his shoulders slumped like they were carrying a weight he couldn't set down. I failed you, he said. I turned my head toward him. No, you didn't. He shook his head hard. I knew she was testing you. I knew something was wrong, and I didn't stop her. His voice broke. She's my mother. I should have protected you. I reached for his hand, even though my arm felt weak. She made her own choices, I said. This is on her. But guilt has a way of ignoring logic. Daniel stayed by my side all night. When nurses came in to check my vitals, he stepped back but never left the room. When I dozed off, I woke up to find him still there, staring at the floor like he was replaying every warning sign he'd missed. The next morning, my sister Rachel burst into the room. She took one look at the 4 in my arm and burst into tears. Then she got angry. Why didn't you tell me it was this bad? She demanded. I looked away. I didn't want to cause problems. Rachel crossed her arms. You almost died to keep the peace. That sentence stayed with me. Even after I was discharged. Even after Margaret was charged. Even after the adrenaline faded. I went home, but nothing felt normal. Food terrified me. I'd make myself a sandwich and stare at it for 20 minutes, my heart racing. If Daniel cooked, I hovered, watching every ingredient. If food came from anywhere else, I couldn't touch it. I lost weight. I stopped sleeping. I survived. But I wasn't okay. And for the first time, I understood that surviving wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something much harder. 3 days after I got home from the hospital, Daniel and I received a call from the district attorney. His name was Ethan Wallace. He spoke calmly, professionally, like someone who had said these words many times before. We're filing charges, he said. And we need to meet with you. When we sat across from him in his office downtown, the table between us was covered in evidence. Photos. Printed screenshots. Sealed bags. The notebook was there. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Ethan flipped it open and slid it closer anyway. This is what makes the case strong, he said. This shows intent. He pointed to the dates. The notes. The careful handwriting. She planned this over time, he continued. She adjusted doses. She observed outcomes. That's not confusion. That's premeditation. Daniel's jaw tightened. How long could she go to prison? Ethan didn't soften his answer. Attempted murder carries 15 to 20 years. I thought hearing that would make me feel better. It didn't. All I felt was tired. A week later, more information came in. The forensic analysis confirmed the extract Margaret used was pharmaceutical grade. Expensive. Regulated. Something you couldn't just buy accidentally. She had to search for this, Ethan explained. She had to order it intentionally. That night, Daniel's father called. His voice sounded older than I remembered. I didn't know, he said quietly. She hid it from me. He told us he was filing for divorce. That he planned to testify against her. 2 days after that, my phone rang again. This time, it was Margaret's sister. She didn't bother with pleasantries. You're destroying the family, she shouted. She would never really hurt you. I tried to explain. About the notebook. The extract. The video. She talked over me. Families forgive. You're being vindictive. I hung up shaking. When I told Ethan about the call, his expression hardened. That's witness intimidation, he said. We'll document it. More names surfaced after that. Daniel started calling relatives. Quiet conversations. Careful questions. And the stories came out. A cousin with a peanut allergy. A family friend with celiac disease. A woman who ended up in the ER after eating something Margaret insisted was safe. Different people. Same pattern. Ethan met with us again 2 weeks later. This is no longer a single incident, he said. It's a pattern of abuse. He offered a plea deal. Less prison time. No trial. I went home and sat at my kitchen table for hours, staring at nothing.
Part of me wanted it to be over.
To stop reliving it. To stop hearing her name. But another part of me remembered lying on that restaurant floor, gasping for air, while she watched. The next morning, I called Ethan back. We're not taking the deal, I said. I want a trial. Daniel squeezed my hand. For the first time since the poisoning, I didn't feel afraid. I felt certain. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I testified for hours, my hands shaking as I spoke into the microphone. Margaret sat at the defense table in a neat blue dress, looking like someone's harmless grandmother. She didn't cry when the video played. She didn't look away when the notebook was read aloud. She only spoke once, when the judge asked if she had anything to say. I was trying to help, she said. They misunderstood me. That was it.
No apology. No remorse.
When the verdict came back, guilty of attempted murder, the room went silent. The judge sentenced her to 15 years, with mandatory psychiatric treatment. As the bailiff moved toward her, Margaret finally turned and looked at me. This is your fault, she snapped. You destroyed the family. For a moment, the old guilt tried to creep in. Then, it disappeared. Daniel took my hand, and we walked out of the courtroom together. We moved a month later. New apartment. New kitchen. Big windows where I could see every ingredient on the counter. Daniel read labels twice without me asking. He called manufacturers. He never once told me I was being dramatic. I started therapy. I learned that my fear made sense. That my body wasn't broken, it was protecting me. Slowly, I ate food Daniel cooked. Then food from a restaurant after calling ahead. Then dinner with friends again. Life didn't go back to the way it was. It went forward. Some family members cut us off. Others stayed. I stopped trying to make everyone comfortable. I stopped apologizing for needing to live. I carry 2 EpiPens now. I probably always will. But I'm not ashamed of that anymore. Because believing my body saved my life. And choosing my safety, even when it made people angry, was the bravest thing I've ever done.